Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and this is the Asher Marketing Podcast. Our guest this week is Christy Spencer. Christy, how you doing?
Anthony, how are you?
I am great. Thanks for being here with us. So you and I were talking before we hit record that we've kind of known each other forever, but this will be the longest conversation we've ever had.
Well.
Yeah. So you are in the wonderful world of recreational vehicles now, and I'm hearing that that is a booming business. Tell me more about that. What's going on? What's causing that, and how is that affecting you?
Yeah, it's crazy. So what's interesting about the RV business is about every 7 years we see an uptick. Every 7-8 years we see an uptick in the business in any case. And so prior to the pandemic, we were on a really nice kind of upward glide. When the pandemic hit, obviously travel shut down. Everything was closed. People still wanted to vacation.
Yeah.
And we're looking for ways to do it safely. And it really dovetailed with a time where people were looking, I think in general, like we're looking for more authentic experiences, right? So maybe the glitzy, gaudy, over the top, hedonism too in the Bahamas doesn't have the shine on it. And a lot of people were gravitating towards camping anyway.
Yeah.
So we saw the uptick, the pandemic hit, our industry has exploded. Camping is up 80%. Camping RV sales are up 40%. Huh. And that's a relatively mature industry, right? It's not like RVs were invented yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to talk more about that, but I want to start with your career path, because you've done a few things over the years. You were, and my extensive research being the 10-minute conversation we had before we hit record, but you were in media sales. You worked for a company called Caldwell Color, which I'm going to need your help in defining exactly what Caldwell is, because it's one of those things that I know, but I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Then you were at an agency, and now you're in the RV world. So talk us through, how did you start your career? Where'd you go to school? How'd you end up in the career path you're in? And how did you make the twists and turns that you made over the years?
Yeah. Can we stay for longer than an hour? Just curious.
Yeah, we might need it.
No. So I went to IU, Indiana, Bloomington. I was a telecommunications major.
Okay.
I didn't even know that degree existed any longer, but I've gotten a couple of resumes in. Okay. So it still exists, but I was a telecommunications major, and I focused in advertising at the time.
All right.
So, and I went to school, you and I think, went to school at about the same time. And it was a great time to get into marketing, because the marketing was changing a lot. It was more research-based, more customer-based. A lot of my education at university was a lot of research. It was pretty deep,
yeah,
which I appreciated.
For me, it was pre-internet, which was a whole different world.
Right.
But, you learn some fundamentals that I think are still very valid and important going in.
Yeah, I think when we were in school, that's when we were really pushed to understand the customer more. Remember, voice of the customer. That was the early marketing warfare, the early days of understanding what made a business tick, how businesses made money. And so from there, I did an internship at Wpta.
Okay.
With some people we probably both know that are still in the industry here today. And then did a few stints in radio and outdoor media. And even then, selling radio, we would put together these fantastic promotions. I made it far more complex than it needed to be.
Yeah,
I was going to tell you a story. So Tim Borney was one of my clients. Yeah. And I pulled together a pitch for Don Ayers, Honda. And the pitch to Tim, I sat in his office, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I sat in his office and said, "Here, Tim, I've got this idea. I think we should put together a campaign to sell cars to women, because women buy cars too." Yeah. That's horrible coming out of my mouth now. Yeah. And to Tim's credit, this is so beautiful. To his credit, he looked at me, he goes, "I don't think we need to talk down to women who are buying cars." I'm like, oh. Yeah. I was 23, maybe. It was awesome. It was brilliant. But anyway, I did that, and then I moved to Caldwell, and I ended up there because my brother was an accountant. So I went to work for a division of Caldwell called Color Curve Systems. Okay. And my job was to help companies write color control programs for production. Okay. And then give them the materials to use them in manufacturing. So my clients were Nike and Apple. When I worked with Apple when the iMacs came into being. We did all of that.
Oh, wow.
Worked with the M&M Mars when they started introducing new colors, which was, super secret. We knew that it was going to be blue before anybody else did. But Coca-Cola, Adidas, Frito-Lay. It was a great job. I handled my territory was the East Coast, the West Coast, and Texas, and some other poor woman had to handle all of the middle. I'm not exactly sure why they divided it up that way, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I traveled about, I don't know, I think I was on the road pretty much, 3.5 weeks a month.
Oh, wow.
And loved it. It was brilliant. I was 25, 26, 27.
Sure.
So I did that, and then I did a quick stint at a brand strategy firm, Trent Design. Worked with Trent Thompson, which was great, and kind of brought me back to my marketing roots. And then Caldwell had me come back, and I became vice president of sales and flipped to their paint division. So what Caldwell's core business was and is making color merchandising tools for paint companies. Yeah. So I had a really incredible boss, the president of our company, a guy named Don Freeland. And Don emphasized creativity. Yeah. His thing was that we wanted to think out of the box. We were going to do more than manufacture color merchandising. We were going to be the thought leaders in that space. So, for that company, I ran creative camps. We'd go off site every quarter. We'd take a team to some cool city. Yeah. And it could be Toronto or LA, or since we did an incredible one in Cincinnati, where we would just spend 2 days off site, and we'd cook together. We'd do what we'd call it retail research, but look and see how other people were, other categories were merchandising, and then pull back concepts and ideas and ideate, spend time ideating. And
so not even from the same industry, but just looking.
No, not from the same industry at all. Yeah, and really with that company, I mean every color merchandising program that you see anywhere certainly in North America right now has Caldwell's footprints on it.
Okay. So color is something you're on a board. Explain this board.
Color marketing group.
Yeah. So is that something that's sort of happened accidentally, or is that an interest you've always had?
Yeah. So I was in prepping for this podcast. I was thinking of just about my career. It was actually really fun to think about. So thank you for the opportunity. But I think part of what has been really fun for me is friendships and relationships and collaborations. So Color Marketing Group is a group for your listeners, is a group of color marketing professionals, people whose job it is to apply color to Subaru cars and everything, you name it. And we get together once a year, and we look at social, economic, political trends, technology trends, and identify where those things that are happening in the world, that those influences are going to take color 2 and 3 and 5 years out.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating. I don't want to take us too far off track. I cut you off in the middle of talking about your career path. We'll get back to it. But yeah, it is fascinating. It's not something, quite honestly, that I think about very often, but it does kind of smack me in the face. We live in a world, in a country where red and blue now have a meaning that they didn't have 10 years ago, for better or for worse.
Truly.
Yeah. So, that's something I think that has a huge impact on stories and on brands, sometimes without us as consumers even realizing.
Yeah. And product, if you look, I think automotive is super interesting right now. I don't know if you've noticed we're moving away from metallics into these really beautiful, solid, creamy colors. And they started in cars that were focused on millennials, and they're really becoming much broader. Okay. So they're very, very reminiscent of colors from the 50s. Okay. And it's nice. It's really fun. So that's a great space to work. When I came back to work for Caldwell, I eventually ended up managing all of we had manufacturing facilities in Europe, Asia, and South America, relationships in South America. So I ended up managing global sales and marketing. So I was in Europe a lot. I was in South America an awful lot, which was amazing. I committed to 10 days a month, 10 days out of the country a month for about 5 years, probably. And some of the best relationships I made in that time were also some of my best friends at Color Marketing Group.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think because you're on the road and you're traveling and you're with people through dinner and on the weekends, and it was just really special, different relationships. But that remains, those people from that time in my life remain really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're at Caldwell for about 10 years, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you move where, and how does that happen?
So after Caldwell, when I left Caldwell, that's when I was working overseas so much.
Yep.
And it was amazing. I loved it. I still get a little twinge every time I walk down a jet bridge, like, it's my least favorite part of travel.
Yeah, sure.
But I loved, I've been so many places between my first job at Caldwell and my second job at Caldwell, and developed great relationships in the industry. But my son I have a 19-year-old son now. His name is Colin, and he hit middle school. Yep. And I felt like I needed to be home. It was really funny. We were driving to school one day, and he was in the back seat, and I said, I'm thinking about changing jobs. I'm thinking that I might take a job in Fort Wayne and work in the area a little bit more. How do you feel about that? And he sits back and he says, Mom, he goes, you're going to ruin my commute. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're going to ruin my commute. I'm used to staying at grandma's when you're gone. You're going to, break the whole thing up, Mom. What are you doing? But it was totally the right decision. So I had an opportunity. I had used Britain Marketing and Design Group as one of my vendors when I was at Caldwell, and I've known Jeff and Sue for a long, long time.
And they've done a lot of work in the paint space. They've worked with Sherwin Williams and others. I don't know if that was your influence or if they were doing that beforehand.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
So when and I'd known Jeff and Sue for a long time, and their core business when I came was Wpta, right? So I think that was 95% of their top line was Vera Bradley. And, everybody knows the work that they did for Vera is just remarkable. So they had all of this talent on board, and really wanted to find a way to extend it to other industries. So Sue and I talked, and we came on. And I really, interestingly enough, when I came, I didn't purposefully plan to stay in paint. That wasn't that wasn't top of mind. But when I got there, I obviously have been designing color merchandising for a really long time, and knew where a lot of the bodies were buried and had a passion for it. So shortly after I came, we landed a job, or some former clients of mine from a Canadian paint company called Wpta reached out. And we did a big program with them. So in color merchandising for paint companies, when you walk into a Lowe's or Home Depot, that array of merchandising is what we call a color system. Right. So it usually consists of some kind of big palette and then some smaller groups or color cards, depending on what your commercial objectives are. So we did some work for Wpta, and then another friend of mine was the president of Ace Paints, and she called me and said, we're going to blow up the paint department at Ace. We're gonna build new products. We want to build a world-class merchandising experience. So we worked with Mary and developed the paint studio for Ace. And then after that, we ended up inside of Sherwin-Williams, and we did so much work for Sherwin-Williams when I was at Britain. So we did actually still at Menards, what you see now in the Dutch Boy display, everything you see. It was really funny at the time when I was at Britain. Vera is such a class account to work on, and there weren't a lot of designers who wanted to work in paint. It seemed very pedestrian, relatively speaking. And so the team that worked on the Ace project, and actually even the Dutch Boy project was a couple of interns, a first year.
Oh, wow.
And a writer who had been writing for social media. So it was a very young, but obviously super talented. Almost all of them are still there. But it was a very young, enthusiastic group, and there wasn't a big enough space in the agency at the time for us to meet, so we took over a garage in the back.
Yeah, because this was when you were out on Coliseum,
That's
correct?
right.
Yeah,
that's right. So we had one conference room. We could fit 8 people in it. But we really needed to, I don't know how you create, but when I'm working on a project, I call it mementoing everything, right? So we put everything up on the walls. And so we took this young design team, and actually, Danielle Hartman and Molly Stronzak and Amy Reef. Yeah. So it was those 3 women.
Okay.
And Emily Richwine, who is a copy director at Vera Bradley now.
Yep.
That was the team. And
Okay.
so we took over a garage, and we would open this big garage door in the back, and we had, lots of blank walls, and would put the work up there and collaborate and critique. And we had this great technique that I still use today, which we called plussing. We stole it from Disney. Do you know about plussing?
I don't. What's plussing?
So plussing, it was fun because the team was young, right? And nobody was flawless at that point, including me, right? So we would work on concepts, and everybody would go off. We'd meet as a group and kind of lay down the project, and everybody would go off on their own and work on the same thing, but separately.
Okay.
And then we would all bring our work back, and we would look, everybody would present their own work, and you could comment on someone else's work, but only to make it better.
Okay.
So you could never say, I don't like that, or that's not really working for me. You'd say, wow, that's really good. What if we added this to it? What if we plussed it? And it was a great vibe with those women. It was really fun.
Yeah.
So we did Dutch Boy, which is still probably my favorite project that we've ever worked on. I still love it. I think it's really beautiful, and really there's a lot of thought between Dutch Boy. What we did for Sherwin-Williams and why we ended up with so much work is Sherwin has a portfolio of about 7 paint lines. 7 paint brands, and they were all saying the same thing and pointed at the same clientele, more or less.
Yeah, so they were cannibalizing their own brand,
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we took each brand, we ended up over a handful of years, taking each brand and really kind of nuancing them to be at a really specific audience. So Dutch Boy is very millennial. It's about being messy and play and exploring and painting. And if you love it today and you don't love it tomorrow, you paint again. Or if you paint it, you don't love it, you paint again. But
and there's some pricing implications with that too, I would imagine.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, going back to the earlier conversation about how things have evolved over the years, there used to be a bigger opportunity to be all things to all people, and that's gone now. You have to know with precision who your audience is because things are so fragmented. And to get the message, it's better when you have a target audience today than it's ever been, because you can reach them pretty relatively easy. But you do have to have that differentiation and know who your audience is. So I think, even in paint, that's super important.
Well, and particularly when you're they're not a holding company, but when you have a portfolio of brands in the same space, which is happening in every industry, RV included. We'll talk about that. But when you're a portfolio company, it's such a lost opportunity if you don't position your brands in unique ways.
Sure.
So we did Dutch Boy, which was very millennial, very fresh, really fun. And then we worked actually with Sherwin to land the Lowe's account. So for that job, we were in the ground floor with the sales team and built the strategy, did the pitch. We were at Lowe's unveiling this big structure. We ended up building a really tall display, which had never been done in the space before. It's been copied now and it's everywhere. But at the time, it felt pretty crazy, and they did it. They went for it. They took Sherwin on as a brand in big box, which had never been done before. Sherwin had always really wanted to maintain their keep their brand outside of big box, because they have Sherwin-Williams stores. And they want to cannibalize that. So worked on that project, worked on a professional paint brand called Pratt & Lambert, which is very highbrow, very sophisticated.
Okay. And I just acted like I knew what that was, and I don't. And when you said it was highbrow, that's why.
Because you're super, it's an East Coast brand.
Okay.
So growing up in Massachusetts, it'd be a brand that your parents were probably familiar with.
All right.
But it's really a designer brand. It's very, it's similar to Benjamin Moore, I guess, but it's a narrower brand. So, and we brought on Valspar, and we worked on some things for that. And I'd known Valspar because I worked with them before. And then We did the whole Minwax. We redid the Minwax brand, which is super fun because it's a really cool. It was very similar to Dutch Boy in that it's a storied American brand, and there's a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of emotion, I guess, around that, and a lot of nostalgia around that brand. And we like Dutch Boy, we modernized it. We got to touch the logo. We got to touch the go-to-market strategy. Yeah. So that was super fun. And it was a good, working at Britton was a chance. So when I worked at Caldwell, we kind of got to level one with the paint companies, but when I went to Britton, we got to go behind the scenes and see all the machinations that led up to the decisions and work with, the vice presidents and the sales team. And it was a blast. We had a ton of fun.
That sounds like a really great experience.
Yeah.
So you're at Britton for about 6 years, and then you move into the position you're in now. So tell me about that transition. How do you end up working for Keystone RV?
Yeah. So at the agency for 6 years, super rewarding. I knew that I wanted to be on the inside. So I'm a pretty business-minded marketer, right? It's really important to me that the marketing work that I do has material gains for the business, right? That's the fun part. I love to see the impact.
To an end, not an end unto itself.
Right. And that it's really tightly knit with the strategy overall. And I want to understand that. So for that reason, I hadn't ever worked on the inside. Yeah. And so my son was still in high school again. And so everything is children-centric, as you know, until at some point I hear they get launched. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I tell people all the time that I'm either enjoying that phase or I'm a terrible parent because there are multiple days that go by that I forget I have a child.
Right?
It's like, I have someone who I'm somewhat responsible to in Muncie. So
and we love them very much, but that will be their time and it will be our time too.
That's right.
Colin's actually in school now at University of Washington, so I got a taste of that, and then the pandemic, he ended up finishing his last quarter at home.
Yeah.
But he was still in high school here in Fort Wayne. And so when I kind of looked around at what opportunities I had in Fort Wayne, RV was so interesting because it's very similar to where Sherwin was in that. Keystone, so the company I work for now is the largest manufacturer of towable RVs in probably the world, but certainly North America. So towable is anything that you don't drive, right? So fifth wheels, travel trailers, toy haulers. I'll teach you all about those.
Yeah, I'll need all the help I can get.
I know, right? It's a foreign language for me too. But from outside looking in, it was kind of a sea of sameness, right? So here, all of these RVs, all of these brands, all of these models, and they all look the same, and they truly did, particularly then, really look the same. They take design cues from each other. They use similar naming conventions. It's a very product-driven, historically a very product-driven industry. Okay. And so I was intrigued. I wondered if the experience I'd had at Sherwin, I could take that knowledge and into a new space and maybe do something similar. So I reached out to the CEO at the time via LinkedIn, which cracks me up because how many people reach out to you on LinkedIn on any given day?
Yeah,
like a million.
All the time. Yeah.
A million, and I never answer.
Happens to you too, and
I never answer anybody.
Sales inquiries from people I've never heard of, and, those just kind of go in one ear and out the other. Yeah,
right. So, but for whatever reason, and it was a few years ago where it wasn't quite as proliferate as it is now.
Sure.
But he read my email. He read my LinkedIn message, and I wrote him a note, and I said, "Hey, I see what you're doing. I think it's really intriguing. I have some thoughts about portfolio management. I'd love to talk to you about it." And he reached out, and we talked, and he hired me ridiculously quickly. I think he was just hired.
When you show an interest in what people do and you show them that you did your homework, that's way different than, getting a formulaic email where the only thing they wrote differently in it is your name, if that. So it sounds like you took the time to do your research and customize the message in a way that got attention. So that's good.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, so that's where I am now. I've been there for 3 years.
So let's talk about Keystone then. Tell us a little bit about how you describe the company to those who don't know a lot about it. What are some of the brands? What are the points of differentiation? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, Keystone's the largest in the industry. So, the RV industry is very similar to a lot of industries in that there are three big companies that kind of own everyone. Mm-hmm. So, in our industry, it's Thor Industry, which is my parent company, and Forest River, and Winnebago. And Winnebago's kind of the small kid on the block, even though they're smaller, they're still quite large, even though they're, that's the heritage name in the industry.
Yeah, and Winnebago to some extent is the Kleenex, as Kleenex is to tissues, Winnebagos have become to RVs to some extent.
Absolutely.
Which is probably not something your brand wishes was true. But,
yeah, absolutely. But, they're cool. They've got great nostalgia. And I know my counterpart at Winnebago really well. So Keystone has 19 nameplates. So we manufacture everything from $14,000 single axle, we call them minis, single axle RVs, all the way up to 43-foot, 16,000 pound fifth wheels.
Wow.
And every derivation therein. So my company was built on a distribution model. Our company's 28 years old, I think now, which interestingly is relatively old in the RV space.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're at a more mature level. But when the company was built, it was the model was distribution. So the more dealers you could get, the more product you could sell. So kind of like Ford did with Mercury when we were growing up, right? We stood up two brands in every product classification.
Okay.
So there's the 19 nameplates and they are different. So yeah, like I said, so part of what I'm doing is trying to understand where they are and what we can do with them. But we have a campus up in Goshen, Indiana. It's a contiguous campus that we manufacture from. I think we have 24 plants. It's huge. It's just huge.
Wow.
And
How
then
many employees-ish, do you know?
7,000.
Wow. Wow. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. You're welcome to come up anytime you like. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So 7,000 employees. And then we also have a manufacturing plant in Pendleton, Oregon. One of the things about RVs that's interesting is you have to get them to the destination where they'll be sold.
Sure.
And it's not free, right?
Yeah.
So if we have to move a product from Goshen out to Portland, and it's a $14,000 product, it's really hard to figure out how to add that transportation cost into the cost of goods, right?
Sure. So how much are you dealing with supply chain issues right now? A recent guest was Josh Wickersham, who's with Harris Boats.
Oh, yeah, same.
We were talking about that, and I'm guessing there's some parallels there.
Yeah. So and it impacts my role too, but right now supply chain, the demand is so high, and so that's that, and we'd have supply chain issues if demand were if that alone was what was going on, but then with all of the kind of trade related and pandemic related shortages, it's a huge issue, and I think we're almost to the other side of that in my industry. Yeah. But you never know. That the blizzard in Texas knocked out the fiberglass industry for 3 weeks. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. So no insulation, no fiberglass parts. And so it's a big issue. And the other big issue that we're facing right now as an industry is labor. And what's curious about the RV industry is 90 to 95% of all RVs manufactured in North America are manufactured in Elkhart County. Yeah,
that's something I've heard, and I've never delved into that. Is what's the legacy of that? How has that come to be?
Yeah, how's it come to be, and how can it still be?
Yeah.
So really, not only are all the manufacturers there at this point, I don't know how, I actually, Anthony, don't know how it came to be. I imagine, somebody built a company and then two people jumped off and built another company. But at this point, the supply chain is also super consolidated in Elkhart County. So if you think about what we build, we have to roll in chassis and sidewalls and, big pieces, lots and lots.
You're building a home on wheels in some cases, even when it is.
In every, total,
case.
Yeah. It is all of the construction and they're really built like homes. They're built by hand. It's not like our GM plant down the road where construction is automated. They're built by human beings. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
So at this point, to stand up an RV company outside of that bubble, you've got a lot of other costs in getting components and goods to you. So I think that's why it remains so consolidated. But the issue we're facing right now is labor. They're fantastic jobs. Gosh, people who work in our plants do very, very, very well. It's hard work.
Yeah.
But they do remarkably well, far better than I did for a lot of my career. And but they can't find housing. And
so was there a period where where manufacturing just stopped during the pandemic? Yeah, and if so, how long was that?
Yeah, it wasn't very long. Yeah. So everything shut down kind of mid-March, right? I feel like we shut down, I feel like we shut down manufacturing maybe the last week of March.
Yep.
And I think we were down through May, maybe mid-April.
Yeah.
We were deemed essential services.
Yeah.
So we were allowed to come back up pretty quickly. But then, even then, we had to combat. It's a lot of people, 7,000 people who are working in close quarters, and so we had lots and lots of our workforce struggle. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, we have multi-generational households in Goshen,
you have
and
kids at home. You have all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a tough time. It does feel like the company was terrific. They really, I feel like they really stepped up. But it was I'd be okay if we didn't do that again.
Yeah. I'd like to skip that next time it comes around if you can. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. You mentioned before we hit record, you've got a team of 14 now. Is that correct?
I do.
Tell us a little bit about your team. How does the work get done?
Yeah, it is. It is crazy. It's really crazy. And I'm every day trying to figure out how to do it better. But we have a whole creative team. So almost all of our creative is done in-house.
Yep.
We have a full video team, photography, design. We don't have a writer. I really need to hire a writer. So if you're out there and you want to write for Keystone, call me. But we have so much product go through. So we have 400 plus models that change. They used to change twice a year, which was crazy, another story. But now they change once a year. And so we're constantly putting out creative. And, with social now and digital, it's the vacuum that never ends. But it's great. I mean, it's a great space to work in. We have beautiful products to talk about. We talk about fun and recreation. So it's amazing. So under my responsibility is this creative team. We have a terrific studio, and then we have programs. So I manage inside sales. So we've got an inside sales team, and that's backed by a big tech stack. It's fueled by our website, right? So we're pulling leads into our website. Everything about our website is a performance marketing kind of engine to pull leads. And then these people work with you if you're interested in buying an RV to answer questions or show you product or locate product on the ground. And they're really kind of they're the human part of the rest of it. So that team, and then we have a big channel marketing effort. So we're two-tier distribution, obviously. We have independent dealers, and so we have to market to dealers, and then we also market to consumers. And so our channel marketing team, we do all kinds of things. We just built a big sales enablement platform for our dealers. So it's training, incentive, motivation. It has leaderboards. It gives you product information as you're walking a customer out to the lot. It's kind of all in your pocket. And then you level up like you do with a Delta Sky Miles program, right? So there's that piece. We support our dealer marketing team with resources and tools and know-how. We do a lot with dealer satisfaction, understanding what's working really well, what's not, kind of monitoring that over time to make sure we're moving the needle. That team does a lot. So there's that group. And then we just recently, and channel marketing. So a lot of this has been built in the past 3 years. Channel marketing's been a thing for a year and a half, maybe.
Okay.
And then we just stood up another discipline called owner success. So one of the cool things about Keystone is we have 1 million owners on the road. You know, I say one of our greatest strengths is our size, and our greatest weakness is our size.
Sure.
So we look to lean into our strength and lean into our size as a strength. So we've got folks now focused on remarketing to owners, obviously, but also making sure that owners feel a love, and we're celebrating and we're sharing owners' stories, and we're engaging, and again, being human. We're a big company, you know, we're a big company, and I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
It's so emotional, you know, camping and your RV is so personal. And I think when you're a company our size, you very quickly can become the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not bad guys.
Sure.
And our customer service team is amazing.
Yeah.
So a woman named Melissa Casey is looking after that part of our business. And then I have 2 people who look after all of the brands. So you can imagine the data that it takes to not only, I mean, just the data it takes to load our website and get floor plan drawings and then market the brands individually on top. I mentioned that we are a distribution-based company, and for a long time, those brands just stood alone. You were Cougar or Montana, and Keystone was, you didn't talk about Keystone. And we've kind of flipped that a little bit because there's a lot of strength with Keystone, but we still like to tell brand stories.
Sure. So how much of your experience, obviously some of the paint stuff applies and you know, there's things that apply. How much of it was new and you had to learn it from the ground up, and how much of your experience translated coming in the door?
Yeah, so much.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm getting my PhD right now.
Yeah.
And the tech part. So I'd worked some with, you know, website builds, but the tech stack that we have that manages, you know, everything we do right now is pretty robust, and that was all pretty new to me. So I laugh with anybody I work with. I say, I'm going to ask you the question 3 times because it's going to take me 3 times to understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the last guest I spoke to, Melissa Dunning, we were talking about how she now works for Byrne Apparel. She's been there 3 months, coming off 17 years in a different industry. So I told her it was both fascinating and terrifying for me to hear about that, because I've been doing the same thing for 17 years. So I can imagine it's a lot to learn for sure.
There's so many, it can be totally overwhelming, but there's nothing you can't figure out.
Sure.
There's so many resources at your disposal. And, you know, I did the same thing here that I've done in every job that I've ever had. I found the people who knew and asked them tons of questions and made them my friends and had them on speed dial and until I, you know, and I faked it until I could figure it out. But it took, I think with any job for me, it's taken 2 years to get to any level of competence, mastery, whatever. And this job, it took 3.
Yeah.
It really did.
Well, and sometimes you want to hang on to some of that objectivity, because the more you become expert in an area, you kind of forget what the customer, you know, doesn't know. So you need to hang on to some of that. And that's one of the advantages I've found of working at agencies. You can't get too deep into many industries, so you can bring an objectivity that can be helpful to telling the story, because you're sort of where many of the consumers are in terms of your knowledge. So,
yeah, that's totally true.
So in terms of big projects, things that are taking up a lot of your headspace right now, what's on your plate? What are some of the major things that are keeping you up at night, getting you excited, maybe some combination of those?
Yeah, well, I sleep terribly as a rule.
So you don't need any help.
Everything.
Yeah.
You know, so we spent the first 2.5 years really just doing all the blocking and tackling. What's the brand about? Building the branding and harmonizing Keystone and bringing that to the front. We built the website. We built the sales enablement. I can't say that word today. Platform. And now it's like the engine's on, and we're figuring out how to make it better.
Yeah.
So we're interrogating the heck out of our website and how it's being used, and where there are breakpoints, and then fixing them, right? Like kind of systematically fixing them. And the same thing with our, we call it Key Connect, which is its inside sales program. So when you enter a form on our website, of course, we start tracking you and
Yeah,
reading everything you do forever.
Yeah.
But we also pass those leads. Well, we nurture some of the leads, but some of the leads we pass off to our dealers. And we've connected with our dealers all the way through their CRMs. So we understand, we can see, basically we can see from the time you become a lead to if you close the sale. So we're interrogating how the website works. We did a huge project for that Key Connect team. They were using 4 or 5 different softwares. There was a lot of indirect labor that was causing them to be inefficient.
So on the CRM side, your dealers are independent. They're all using different CRM. Yeah, that's got to be a challenge. Yeah.
It is, but we have a great partner in that space, a company called Rollick, and they built TrueCar. They've just got really great technology. And so we can integrate with almost any CRM system. And when we pass a prospect off as they move through that dealer sales cycle, if we're integrated, we can see, if they visited a dealership, if they've got a working deal, if they've got a closed deal, and then we get all of the warranty registrations back in through our company, and we reconcile that with the lead. So we have a reasonable idea of closed sales.
So you still have a window into it, even if the lead's no longer yours. Yeah,
it's true. So what's keeping me up at night is, it's not in an excited way. Like I can now turn the dials and really make those systems hum. And I think for the past, 2.5, 3 years, it's just been a waterfall, just trying to get things done.
Sure. Okay. So now we're going to move to the speed round of the show, where I ask you a few questions that are like the questions we've already talked about, although I might throw you a curveball.
Oh, boy.
And I'm looking for sort of your tweetable, digestible advice and thinking. The first one has to do with career path.
Yeah.
If you're talking to your son, if you're talking to someone who's younger in their career, if you're talking to someone who's thinking about making a career change, like some of the changes you've made, what's your best advice? What do you think is most important in terms of building a successful career in marketing or beyond?
I'm so curious to know what you'll say about this too. I'd say curiosity.
Yeah.
So ask tons of questions, meet people who are interesting, learn, even if it's not germane to what you're doing at this moment.
Yeah.
Be curious and build relationships.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, that's actually one of the first words in your LinkedIn summary is the word curious. I noticed that. So
that shows up a lot.
Yeah.
That shows up. And I'll tell you, I feel like I don't deserve to have done many of the things that I've been able to do in my career. I feel super, super lucky. Yeah. And it's the people that I met along the way that pulled me into, the woman who pulled me into ACE. There was an EVP at Sherwin, who I'm still close with, that gave us more business than I could ever imagine. And that's how those relationships were built.
Yeah. Yeah. I said there was a group that I was speaking with last night, and I said, anything good that has ever happened to me is all because of a relationship. It's because even this podcast is because I knew Nick, and it would not have happened if I didn't have a relationship with someone who knows what they're doing, because I clearly don't in this space. So it really comes back to that. And I like the curiosity piece. One of the things that I've tried to get better at in this podcast, is a sneaky way of doing it, is listening. And if you're curious, you're going to naturally be better at listening than if you're less so. So, All right, second question. And this one, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. I like to ask people, to summarize their organization in a pithy phrase, but that's too easy for you. So I'm going to make it a little more difficult. What is something that you would like people to know about either Keystone or the RV industry at large that you think is a misconception that you'd like to correct?
So glad you asked that.
All right, here we go.
I'm so glad you asked that.
This was not set up beforehand. So
no, it wasn't. But it is interesting, and I don't know what anybody's conception of the RV industry is, but I know what mine was for sure. And the real of the industry is the people who live this lifestyle are fascinating. They're adventurous and they love the outdoors. And we have so many, if you look at our ambassadors, we have so many really interesting families who are taking their kids on the road full time. Yeah. And I think what, I have this terrible analogy that I always use with my team, and they groan every time I use it, but I'll use it with you because I don't have another one. But with RVing, if you imagine what your best life looks like, right? Like what your best life looks like, and it's probably maybe not going to an office and staying up all night every day. Your best life looks like being one with nature, being settled in yourself, finding peace, having time to reflect, being physically fit, being active. I say that the RVs are the toast that gets the jelly to your mouth. But RVing it's great. I mean, RVing for me was Yogi Bear Campground. You sit, you build a fire, you drink a bunch of beer, and people do that, and it's a blast too. But for so many people, becoming an RV owner is the ticket to this kind of ideal lifestyle. It's remarkable, even more out west than on the eastern half of the States.
Yeah. And it's funny you mention that, because I've heard so many great stories from people who have taken advantage of that. There's a couple that I did some LinkedIn training for a couple of years ago, and I was talking to them about their story, and they co-own an HR consulting business, and the woman in the relationship, she actually lost her first husband and decided she was going to take a year off, take the kids, homeschool them, but from an RV, and just see the country.
Yeah.
And then she remarried, and now as a couple, they say they like to travel very, very slowly, and they do it in an RV. And I was like, I would like to do that someday. So I think those stories are out there, and you're seeing a lot of brands really harness those stories, and it's some of the best marketing ever, because who doesn't want that life?
I got a call on Thursday. I was driving up Chicago, and I got a call from a couple who just bought an Arcadia, which is a new product line that we just launched. It's beautiful. You should totally check it out. But she plans all events for Google worldwide. And he also works for Google. He's a project manager of some kind. And they because of the pandemic, right? So many, you know about REI built this gorgeous headquarters that they're selling, right? Yeah. But because we're moving to such remote work, that people who are able and have an appetite for it can buy an RV and a truck and work from anywhere, and they are. And that's what this couple plans to do. Yeah,
it really pushed the envelope on location independence, and something that I think was a fringe phenomenon is now becoming much more mainstream. And there's something to that for sure. You hit the industry at the right time.
I did. Yeah. It's pretty magical.
Yeah. So one last question. Yeah. So, what have you taken away from the pandemic, which hopefully we're coming out of? What have you taken away from the experience over the last 14 months that you think will stick with you for the rest of your career?
Oh, my gosh. You didn't give me this question in advance.
Yeah, I'm throwing you a couple curveballs.
I think that... so I'll answer from a manager's perspective. And this is not I could say resilience and whatever, and that is true. But I think this past 14 months was really hard on my team. I think it was really hard on everybody in my company, but I've obviously worked closely with my team, and I just got through performance evaluations. I was a little behind this year, but I just did performance evaluations maybe 2 months ago, and to a person, and suffering may not be exactly the right word, but maybe it is. To a person, almost everybody was suffering a little, like they were questioning and they were feeling disconnected. And they really, almost everybody said, I want to get together and do more things together. And one of my team members listed all the employee benefits that Google offers. I'm like, well, I'm not sure we can go there. But as a manager, it's really impacted what I'm bringing to the table for them. So I shifted pretty hard. I'm pretty, I love the work. I can get a little carried away in the work. I'm pretty aggressive in our goals. And I pivoted, probably 30 degrees. And I'm spending a lot of time looking Working with my people and my team and spending a lot one-on-ones every week with everybody, period. We don't move them. And so that probably is the biggest impact that it had on me as a professional.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a fairly common story. One of the things I think that was a good outcome, even though the pandemic itself was obviously a very bad thing, one of the good outcomes, it's kind of removed the artifice of people just having a work life. And your coworkers now, you've seen, their kids and their cats and their homes through the lens of, video conference. So you can't forget about that part of their life. And I know that it's, for me, being someone who has an adult son and in a different phase of life, I really felt for our younger employees with kids, because that's a whole different, and they're still dealing with it in many respects. So, it really, I think, forced employers to think about their people as people and say, how are we going to adapt to this new world where this is now sort of, all in front of us? And I think many employers have done a good job of that, but it's out of necessity, because now, with, as you were talking about with the job market, it's incredibly competitive. And I think people now won't tolerate workplaces that don't respect the rest of their life. And I think that's a force for good. I really do. Yeah,
I do too. Our industry, I think that was true of millennials probably prior to the pandemic. And I think it's much wider ranging now.
Yeah.
And it is a good thing. Our industry is conservative. And so that has been complicated and a little disruptive and a little uneasy. And they've fortunately given me the latitude to, our rules are a little bit different in the department. And I'm super thankful for that. I think our people are feeling, and we have more flexibility. We can do our work from more places.
Sure.
But it's been interesting. And you're right. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a good place to understand. It's a good point of view.
Yeah.
For us to look at our employees with.
Yeah, wow, we got really deep there for a minute.
I know, I get a little teary. It's a big responsibility.
It really
Managing people is a big responsibility.
Well, I think it really heightened that, the responsibility you feel. I work with people who, each and every one of them is way more capable than I am of almost everything. But when you're more senior in an organization, it hit pretty close to home last year how much of a responsibility you do have to do your best work and to lead, if I can use that word, in a way that's going to help people get through a very difficult time. And that's something that I think I always knew in the back of my head, but I never felt it as much as I did last year.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Same.
Well, Christy, this was really fun. Thanks for having the first conversation ever with me.
So exciting.
And
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was great, and I really appreciate it. And I will take you up on that offer and someday come see your place and learn more about it.
You'll love it. It's crazy. It really is.
Well, thanks for being here, and thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We will be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you will join us then.